Hello, this is Andrew with MaMillion.bike, and this is a Bryton Rider 750 GPS bike computer. Now it is brand new. It should be launching today. This is technically there are two models. This is the E, which is just the device itself, and then there's also a T version which comes with some sensors. So Bryton, I'm guessing they just sent me the sensors separate because it was easier to do it that way. The E model, just the computer itself, is going to be $270 or €250 roughly. And then the T, which is the one with the heart rate and speed cadence sensors, is going to be $350 in the US and €320. Let's get this open. Now I said this was exciting, and there's two big things that make this super exciting for me. One is that it supports radar, ANT radar. And the other, so Varia devices, and then the other is that it supports electronic shifting, so Shimano Di2, for example. And these are just awesome because the other Bryton devices that I've reviewed in the past do not support those. And there's also a ton of other really cool features, but we'll get to that once I figure out what's in the box here. So obviously the device, some manuals and warnings and stuff. We have a side or L micro USB. Actually, where's the charging port on here? So the charging port is underneath here, which is kind of unfortunate. I prefer to see them down on the bottom because when you mount this either out front or on the stem of your bike, then you can't get to it. Although this does make it a little bit easier to get to it if you were to use that, if charging on the bike for a really long ride. Now I haven't actually had to do that myself personally, but it is nice to have that flexibility if you need it. Let's actually take that off. We have what looks to be a pretty fancy out front mount. It's a hex key, a tether, awesome, and then this is a handlebar or stem mount, and then the rubber bands that you need in order to make, or bands that you would need in order to make that go. So let's get this on the scale. So it is 94.3, which is, a touch disappointing because Bryton claims 93 grams, but let's get the weight with a tether. So with tether, it is 95.6. For reference, with a tether, the Rider 420 is 70.6. The Garmin Edge 530 is 80. Wahoo Element Bolt, 61.2. And Garmin Edge 520 Plus is 64.3. So let's measure it out. So lengthwise, 91.3, width is 49.3, not including the mount. The depth is 19.5, and then including the mount, it is 23.6. Okay, so we have our charging point here on the bottom. I do wish this was here because it would make it a little bit more convenient if you did need to charge the device while you're using it. It's kind of difficult to charge a device with an underside port while you're using it on the bike. That said, this does get 20 hours of battery life or claimed battery life, so you may never need to do that. I have actually never needed to do that. I've never taken a ride that's that long. So as I was getting ready to mount the Rider 750 on my stem, it occurred to me that I should be able to swap the inside, this locking plate, with the locking plate that is on my bike. Now this is just a generic, I think it's Kobe or Corby or something like that I bought from Amazon, just a generic out front mount. I can't use this kind of mount because the area here is just too wide to fit on these Pro Vibe handlebars. I've actually tried that before, but what I'm going to try now is I'm just going to try swapping this disc for that disc, so that if you have one of these or you'd rather use this style of out front mount versus the one that comes with it, whether or not you can use that disc in there. So let's pull, I think that's a 2mm. Ooh. So this is actually too wide. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you can see right there. So their disc, the Bryton disc, unfortunately will not fit inside of here, which is kind of a letdown. I'd really hope that that would work. But I'm sure you can find a disc that will fit in there. The one that came with their K-Edge style mount won't work. So back to plan A on the stem. So we're going to quickly walk through the user interface on the Bryton Rider 750. And I'm sorry this screen is very reflective, so I'm trying to keep myself out of it and everything above it, but that's difficult because it has this mirror finish on it. So as you can see here on the top, we have quite a few different profiles, and the device allows for 3 bike profiles. And what's interesting about the Rider 750 versus some of the other Bryton Rider bike computers is that you get the best of both worlds with the way that they've implemented their bike profiles. So you get a profile per bike with settings per bike, including an odometer per bike. But there's a giant pool of sensors underneath all of that, and they just kind of get picked up as you're using them. So you don't specifically assign sensors to a bike, which is fantastic. So anyway, let's go through here first. Let's start with the person, which you kind of give it your name and some specifics around you, your heart rates, your power zone, and all that boring stuff, and then it kind of figures out, FTP and heart rate zones and all that other stuff. This center thing is all of the different rides that you've accumulated with the device, and you can go through and delete them. And then here we have the settings. So first, here's what I was talking about with the bike settings. Each one of these has a profile, and it's a lot easier to manage this stuff in the mobile app. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm just kind of let that run up over here on the right side. You can go in and you can set up your data pages, your lapping features, and that other stuff. It supports all of the GPS, and you can kind of decide what the priority is, how you want it to work, depending on your region and your preferences. Speed priority is kind of an interesting thing where you can tell it how you want it to detect speed. It doesn't, if you don't have the sensors set up, and this of course is again bike specific. So if you have a speed sensor on one bike and you don't have it on another, you can allow the profile to configure for that. Personally, I use GPS because I don't use speed sensors because Strava doesn't care about speed sensors. They use GPS, so it saves me some frustration. The overview, this is where you get all your cumulative values. And again, this is per bike. I'm not going to go into each one of these individually, but you can have data pages set up per bike, which is really neat. Brightness, not really that interesting. Data sync is how you force the computer to synchronize over wireless or force it to sync with your phone. One of the features that I hope that Bryton will add in the future is just to have it do this automatically. Have it be a setting or whatever, where when you get back to a place where you have a configured wireless network, it just detects that and then synchronizes it automatically, much like computers from Wahoo and Garmin do. Bryton told me the reason why they don't do that is because of battery life. Personally, one, I'd rather just take the battery life hit. And secondly, you could get pretty clever about this and store the GPS coordinates of the wireless network with the wireless network, so that if you're within some 30 feet or 100 feet or whatever of that wireless network, then it starts scanning for the wireless network. And if it can connect and you have activities pending, then it would synchronize them. So they could get clever with it and save battery life and just provide a little bit more usable experience. Sensors, pretty self-explanatory. I have a bunch of sensors in here. To add them, you just kind of hit the plus and tell it what kind of sensor it is. I wish that it was a little bit more generic and that you could just say, like, scan for all the sensors and pop them in there without having to know specifically what kind of sensor it is. But That's the way that it is. Once you have a sensor, you can enable, disable it, look at the details, remove it, or try to connect to it. Notifications, that manages app notifications on the device from the mobile device. I'm going to go ahead and turn those on because I want those. System settings, the language, backlight duration. This is one of the things that I also wish that was a little bit different. Right now I have it set on always, which kills the battery. Auto uses the sunset and sunrise time in your location to determine whether or not the backlight turns on or not. There's no current way to make auto work off of like an ambient light sensor. So if I'm using the 750 in a dark environment, but during daylight hours, the backlight is off if it's on auto, which isn't ideal. So if you ride into a tunnel or you're riding through a forest with heavy tree cover, or you're using it in the basement connected to your smart trainer, and the lighting situation is not awesome, it would be better if auto worked that way. The way I've been working around is to have always selected so that I can always see the screen. You do have some options around meter color mode. I actually don't know what that means. I guess that it would change based on, I guess that it would change based on the daylight hours. Again, you can set ketones, sounds, and then this is where you would set whether or not you're using imperial or metric. So that there's not a whole lot left in system that's terribly interesting or useful. You can calibrate your altitude. You can, I wish it would go back to where you were in the settings when you hit back, but that's just kind of a niggle. Navigation settings for rerouting, whether or not you wanted to do it yourself or have the device sort that out. Unfortunately, I haven't had the device long enough to try the navigation, but the device does support navigation, so that's certainly something that I plan to do a more detailed look at in the future. And then of course About just kind of tells you about the device and what version numbers and all that other stuff. So one of the things I really like about the Rider 750 is that you can configure these screens really nicely, and you get these little graphs. As you can see, I do have a little bit of trouble sometimes with the getting it to move from pages to pages, but if you want to just change page without swiping, you can just use this button here. But I really like these graphs, which provide so much information about what's going on currently. So this is a power graph where you have your max. This is from a little ride that I was messing around a little earlier today. And your current and your your 10 second, sometimes I forget it's a touch screen, your 10 second and your average power, and then the same kind of data for speed. And then of course you get individual data screens where you can populate specific bits of information just depending on what you wanted to show. There are a lot of different data fields that are available, including Di2 battery and averages around left-right balance and all that other stuff. I'm not going to go into all of those. The one thing that I wish was a little bit different is that Bryton doesn't provide averages based on watts per kilogram. They call it specific power. They just show you the current specific power or watts per kilogram. For those of us who like to pace off of watts per kilo, having a 3-second or 10-second average would be very useful. I've had a conversation with them about adding that to a different model, so hopefully eventually we'll get time-based averages of specific power. So the last thing to go through is courses. This is where you would select a navigatable track, select a workout, whether that's on your own or if you're using with a smart trainer. So the Rider 750 supports ANT plus FEC, which is Smart Trainer Control. To get this to work properly, it's a little bit counterintuitive. How I think it ought to work is that I would go to the settings, go to sensors, and then try to pair the smart trainer as a sensor. But that's not how it works. If you do that and you set it up as like a power meter or something like that, then it just doesn't work quite right. What you need to do is go to courses, select smart trainer, plus have it search for the smart trainer. And this can take a little while. And then when it finds it, Go ahead and select it. And now we have our trainer set up. When we go into the settings, you can probably on the phone change the name. And then it's got all these, different things that are in here. You can do, once you have a trainer set up, you can do a smart workout, which I've loaded this interval workout from the Bryton Active application from on my phone onto the 750. So you just go ahead and select that, hit play, and hopefully it does something. There we go. So now I go ahead and start, and I have to hit record. So once you sync up with the trainer in here, it will control it, which is what you want to happen. So even if I try to like soft pedal here, it just amps up the resistance on the trainer, which is exactly what it should do. And if I crank up the cadence, it moans a little bit, but then it takes control of it and drops it back down again. So as far as I can tell, and I haven't done a whole workout session, I just haven't had the device long enough to do that. It does work the way that it's supposed to work with the smart trainer. And if you want to, let's go quickly look at what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So we'll just discard. Okay. Now this is the bike I have, my trainer is an Aeroad, so I have that set up as my bike profile for this. So I'm going to go select that, and we'll go to the screen I prefer for this. And as we can see, even if I just want to ride this, like if I want to ride this in Zwift or whatever, and oh, it's telling me that I want to record it. Yeah, we'll go ahead and record this. And so I get speed, I get power. If I was wearing a heart rate sensor, I'd get heart rate, and then I also get cadence. And now, because I have speed, I also get distance. You can use the Bryton test, which is some structured tests for FTP and other things. And that's pretty much all there is to the user interface. Normally I would say this is final thoughts time, but it's hard for me to do that in this case because I received the Bryton Rider 750 from Bryton not that long ago, and it was in a state where it was still undergoing development. I've received 3 firmware updates, and all of my comments here are going to be related to the most current firmware update. It's my understanding, however, that shortly after release, there will be another firmware update which will actually address some of the things that I'm going to tell you here. But until that firmware update is out, I don't feel comfortable saying it's fixed. So just be aware that some of these things should be fixed or addressed in a firmware update which is coming in the next couple of days. Some of those things, and I'm going to try to make sure that I call those things out. There's a thing with Di2, Shimano Di2, where the double press button isn't there. You can't go previous page. That's coming. Both of those things should be addressed in the firmware update. The Di2 feature should work a lot better in the next couple of days. Modifying pages, if you change the layout of the page, you lose your current configuration. That also should be fixed. And then, so I've had some issues with touchscreen sensitivity. I'm going to show a little video here demonstrating kind of what the issue is. Sometimes it takes a couple swipes, and this is particularly bad if you're wearing gloves. Now, I'm not sure if this is one of those things that's going to get addressed in the next firmware update, or if it's going to be a future update, or if it's just a thing with the way that the 750 is. But I do wish that it was a little bit more reactive to the touchscreen. All right, so let's talk about features. As I mentioned, it has a touchscreen, which is awesome, especially at this price point. It blows my mind that they put a touchscreen in at this price point. So the quality of the screen itself, the display, isn't quite as nice as you would see on some competing bike computers, but it's also not even close to the same price point. If you compare the 750 to these other devices, it is so much less money that it totally makes sense that the screen wouldn't quite be at the same standard. The Bryton Rider 750 has Ant Plus radar or Varia support. I'm going to show you a little video here of that working, and it is fantastic. It works exactly the way that you would expect it to. Electronic shifting, DI2. Aside from the things that are going to get fixed, it's great to see your gears on there. It's great to be able to put your DI2 battery on the display pages. And I'm confident that once this future firmware update comes out where you can use the buttons to their full potential and be able to go back a page and forward a page, is just going to be brilliant. Navigation is there. I didn't get a great chance to look at navigation. I've only had a chance to play with that a little bit. It's there. My impression is that it's pretty good, but I have not had the chance to really get out there and do a long ride out in a place where there's a more challenging scenario. And so yeah, I do hope to explore the navigation feature in more detail. As part of the navigation feature, there's a voice search feature, and I'm going to show a video here right now of that working. Coffee shop. Coffee shop. Coffee shop. Or perhaps not working. This is very early days. Honestly, I'm not sure how much I would use this anyway, so I'm not confident that I really want to complain that loudly about it. It's a nice to have. It's cool that it's there. It should work better than it does right now, but I'm not going to complain too much about it. Smart Trainer support, or ANT plus FEC, is fantastic. This is the first Bryton device that I've played with that has full trainer support. It's actually the first Bryton device that I've played with that has electronic shifting, and I think it's the first Bryton device that has radar. So overall, the level of features that the Rider 750 has is amazing, and especially at the price point. Battery life. So given how long I've had the device, given that I've had several firmware updates to it, and given that I've just been playing with it a lot to set up the screens, mess around, dig through the settings and all of that, I didn't get a chance to do a full use this thing the way that you would use a bike computer to get the maximum out of the battery. When I say that I got 11.3 hours out of the device of ride time, what that means is that I had the backlight on all the time. I was messing around with it all the time, a lot, and that number does not capture all the time that I spent playing around with the device when I wasn't riding. So that's 11.3 hours of use as a cycling computer on my bike, with a power meter, with a heart rate sensor, with the Varia when I was outside, and a heart rate sensor, and connected to my kicker, my Wahoo kicker, inside. In that context, I think 11.3 hours is really impressive. It's not the 20 hours that Bryton claims, but one, I don't expect, you're never going to hit the number that they claim, but given all of that stuff, given how much I was playing with it, given how I was using it, I'm thrilled with 11.3 hours. It never felt like I was running out of battery. It never felt like it was a hardship. It just felt like the thing worked, and that's exactly what it should be, and I'm really pleased with that. I've mentioned the price a few times. Wow, the price. €250 for the Rider 750 standalone, or if you want the sensor bundle, it's going to be €320. In the US, it's $270 just for the Rider 750, and if you want the sensor bundle, it's $350. That is amazing. Provides such great value for money. Even if this is not the cycling computer for you, with Bryton coming in to the market with this device at that price point, it can only spur positive competition from the other OEMs out there. From a performance perspective, it turns on fast, it's easy to use. Aside from the touchscreen being a little bit unresponsive, especially when I'm wearing gloves, I'm thrilled with the performance. I think it is it just works fantastically. So we can't talk about performance without talking about GPS accuracy and temperature accuracy and elevation accuracy. So that's what we're going to do now. We have a ride here that I did the other night. If you're familiar with the north suburbs of Chicago, this is Harms Wood. I rode out there along Glenview Avenue and then rode the trail. So we have a mix here of road riding, then trail riding on an unpaved trail with some tree cover. There's a couple of places where you would go underneath through a tunnel under a road. So it should be a good mix of things that are easy for GPS and things that are challenging for GPS. So if we just drill in here along the road, we can kind of see that none of them, well, the Phoenix 6 did the best. Next was the Rider 750. The Rider 420 and Edge 520 Plus are just kind of off the road somewhere. This is pretty consistent with what we have all along the road, where the 520 is just kind of doing its own thing, and the Phoenix and the Rider 750 probably handle it the best. But they're probably all close enough, except the Edge 520, where it's kind of acceptable. So now we get to the place, I'll drill over here, to where I turned off onto the trail. And as we can see here, really only the Bryton Rider 750 got it right, because I just came up here, made a right turn on the trail, and carried on. The Phoenix 6, the Edge 520 and the Rider 420, I don't know what's going on there. They're just kind of all over the place as we go along here, where the 750 is kind of the only one. Oh, well, here we go. Some of them are correcting a little bit better off on this trail. Now, there is some pretty good tree cover here, so it is a pretty challenging environment. This is also pretty consistent as we get through here, where the 420 and the 520 Plus just kind of are doing their own thing. I did take this up and back, so there is a little bit of overlap here, but the Phoenix 6 and the Rider 750 really did the best for carrying on along the trail, as we can see here. There isn't a whole lot more that I can show you here. It's all pretty consistent with that theme, where the GPS accuracy on the Rider 750 is pretty good. It could be better, obviously, but still pretty good. When we get to elevation, I don't know what happened here with the Phoenix 6. It had no elevation captured in its ride. They're all pretty close. The 520 and the 750 are just, the same. And it's all pretty close to, I think that's probably right, because this was a pretty flat ride. It is Illinois after all. So I think that's a sign, a really good sign that things are working the way they should with respect to elevation. So looking at temperature, we do have to discount the Phoenix, the Edge 520 Plus, and the Rider 420, because they were all attached to my person. And in that scenario, they're going to have a hard time really detecting the temperature of the world around me. The Rider 750 actually does a really good job here, because it was in the 40s to 50s Fahrenheit, which is kind of in that 5 to 10 degrees Celsius range. And that's where we have here, where the average is 7 Celsius, and right here is 8 and 7, and that's very consistent with what it should be. Let's get to the wish list. Overall, I think the Bryton Rider 750 is a very solid device. I'm really pleased with the way that it works, and I think that it provides outstanding value for money. But that's not to say that it is perfect. So there are a few things I would like to change, or I would like Bryton to implement, Well, one of those things is to clone pages between bike profiles. You know, you go through a lot of work to set up one bike profile the way that you want it to, and then for the most part, I pretty much want all of my other bike profiles to be that. Maybe I don't have a power meter on another bike, so I just want to clone everything, and then I'll go through and change the widgets or the data fields that are power specific. But otherwise, I just kind of want everything to look the same. And I wish that it was possible to set up a bike profile and then just clone it. That would be fantastic. Also, the ambient light driven backlight, I think that would, you know, extend battery life, and it would be a good feature to have, because if you're riding through a tunnel or you're riding through the forest and it's dark or it gets dark and you have it off or you have it set to auto, it's not going to turn on, and it's just a better user experience. So that would be awesome. And then also the synchronization of activities, you have to interact with the device. That's one of those things that I don't like about it. I think that if there is one thing that annoys me about the Bryton Rider 750, it's that when I press stop, I hit save, I have to do something in order to make it sync to my phone, to Strava, or whatever. And I just want it to do that for me. I want that user experience to be that. And that user experience is something that Wahoo nails. It's something that Garmin has come around to. They haven't quite nailed it to the same extent that Wahoo has, but for the most part, it just works. And so I think that is the one thing that I think Bryton really needs to change about the way that the 750 works. Anyway, thank you for sticking through all this way. I know this got really, really long, but I wanted to be as thorough as I could be. So hopefully you thought that was useful. If you did, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. And thank you, Bryton, for sending me the Rider 750. I very much enjoyed testing it out, having a play with it. And if there's anything else you guys wanted me to test with it, just let me know. Cheers.